Welcome to another episode of the Standard of Truth podcast. I'm not your host, Richard Leduc. Now, we are here on this special President's Day bonus episode. Every President's Day, we have a bonus episode.
Every President's Day that we've had a podcast,
we have had a bonus
episode.
That's right. This is our first President's Day. We're joined today by Gerrit's mother, Renee Dirkmaat. And we are very excited to have her here with us. She drove down so that Gerrit could show her how to properly download the podcast.
Yeah,
he makes a lot of jokes at her expense.
She is as much against her will in this room as probably. I mean, it's luckily she's older now, so we were able to trick her into getting her up here into the room where we're recording this.
Yes, she is being a very good sport and does not want to do this.
Yeah, but she also said something about me no longer being her son.
He's out of the will. So we'll start with the first question. Renee, what was Gerrit like as a wee little child?
And be kind. Remember, people are listening.
I think the question that I get asked most often by people who listen to Gerrit's podcast is he the oldest in the family? And no, Gerrit is number 5. He has 5 brothers and 1 sister. Gerrit was born on Halloween, and I was so upset about that. But
yeah. Well, I mean, because you couldn't go trick-or-treating or what?
I just thought it was awful that the doctors and everybody teased me about having a Frankenstein.
Well, and you know, as time has borne out, I find that first of all, that's very cruel.
Anyway,
they could have just said, "Boy, your baby's fat and ugly," but no, he's literally pieced together from dead other people.
He was a cute little fat baby anyway.
That's a funny story. So I think actually being born on Halloween was helpful to my development because until I was like 3 or 4 years old, I thought everyone got candy because it was my birthday. It seemed like my birthday was a national holiday. Which, you know, it was very ego boosting, you know, at the time.
I think Halloween was always a special time for Gerrit. And the thing that I think about the most is the costumes that he would pick out, he'd create for Halloween. They all had to do with some historical figure, even when he was little.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I mean, I was a pirate one year, but I was.
But you were like some famous pirate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would have to. I was Caesar once,
and he
friends,
was
Roman countryman.
Yeah. What were some of these historic costumes? So, Renee, where did Gerrit get his love for history? Obviously, it starts in Halloween costumes, but where does he really get his love for history?
It starts and ends.
Gerrit's father is an immigrant from the Netherlands, and so he grew up listening to the stories of the war. He was born during the Second World War, during the German occupation of the Netherlands. And so that history was very important to his dad, and he talked about it quite frequently. And Gerrit learned to love history from listening to his father. His father was a very intelligent man, and they just really had a close bond, and he enjoyed all kinds of history. He started with he had an older brother who also was very fascinated by all of this, and they found an Axis and Allies board game.
We bought it. We didn't steal it. I mean, that's like we were down by the docks.
We found it at my neighbor's house in his closet.
We found it in a Kmart, and then we ran out with it. We bought it actually on a trip. We went to San Diego. We went to San Diego, and Dallin and I had our pipe moving money is what we were using. We went down to a game store there, found Axis and Allies, took it back to the hotel room, and then proceeded to play it
the rest of your lives.
Yeah. Yes. We continued to play it over and over and over again.
But that really started his interest in world history and history altogether. He was just really fascinated by it. His brother always said he was going to be the next J. Willard Merritt, and Gerrit would tell us, even when he was a little kid, that he was going to teach history to adults. So,
well, I mean, I got to BYU students. I mean, that's technically, it's pretty close. But I loved history from a young age. But I also think that I gained a lot of verbal and written communication skills from you because you were an English teacher.
Right.
To this day, if you want to upset my mother, you can use something in the improper participle. You can, I believe earlier today, my daughter said something like, yeah, we brung that blanket. And my mom's eyes, they fell, the countenance fell, and she realized that grandma's going to have to be here a lot more often to prevent this, the poor English skills that are being used. But so why don't you tell us why you decided to become an English teacher?
I just always wanted to teach. I never thought of doing anything else. From the time I was a little kid, I always thought that would be neat to be a teacher, and I never even considered anything else, except I was really into the politics of the 60s.
Oh, here we go.
And
this is going to be the best part of this podcast.
And so I decided to major in political science with an English teaching minor, just in case I had
in case you weren't able to bring down the man through the protests? I mean, in case of what? What was your plan majoring in that?
I don't know what I was really thinking of, but I really wanted to major in political science, and mainly because I was raised in a very Republican family, and I just thought John F. Kennedy was the greatest.
Please don't stop listening to us. Please, everyone.
Anyway,
I apologize to Utah County, to Davis County,
But anyway, so I majored in political science, did some internships in Washington, D.C., and while I was at BYU, I was the secretary of the Young Democrats.
The College Democrats.
The College Young Democrats.
Yeah, all right.
And needless to say, it wasn't a popular thing because Ernest Wilkinson was the president at this time. And he was very conservative. And I really made a big booner. I was told to make up a list of people to come and talk to our club meetings each month. Well, I made this list, and I thought, I had worked with a couple of congressmen, and I thought, well, what if they'd come?
Oh.
So I invited them, and so I just went down this list of people I could invite, and I had an inspiration, I guess, I don't know, to invite Hubert Humphrey, who was running against Richard Nixon for president.
Hubert Humphrey, the Democratic nominee for the presidency.
And, and I did it mostly on a whim. I didn't even think about it. I honestly put it in the envelope, addressed it, and I didn't even think about it. Well, he offered to come.
Yeah. So he thinking, I've got to get that all-important Utah vote.
Oh, yeah.
The BYU College Democrats, which I'm sure were legion then, as now. So how did you find out he was going to come speak?
We got a letter. Our letter was returned, and he said, I will be there if I can. And he said, can I come such and such date? His administrative assistant is the one who did all the paperwork. It wasn't
Now, he gave a very famous speech in Utah as part of his presidential campaign where he talked about halting the bombing in North Vietnam.
Right.
Was this the same trip when he came to
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So literally at the peak of his popularity and probably at the peak of his not making Ernest Wilkinson happy, it was this trip because, okay, all right.
Edwin Firmage was his administrative assistant, and he did all the background. And just for your information, Edwin Firmage was Hubie Brown, who was one of the counselors in the first presidency, his son-in-law.
What?
And so
I always knew that Hubie Brown was a Democrat. I knew that because I've even seen some, documents where the other brethren might have been giving him a little bit of a ribbing for his political. I'm sure he loved James E. Faust. I'm sure that
he got it. He got a lot of ribbing for it. But anyway, and so Edwin Firmage did all the background planning to get him out here to BYU because he'd been invited. Well, President Wilkinson heard through the grapevine that
Hubert Humphrey was coming to BYU to speak.
I am lucky I got to graduate from BYU. He was furious.
What did he say?
Who?
President Wilkinson. What did he say?
Did
he say you needed to cancel it?
Oh, no. He wanted to, but he said you don't have the authority to invite people to come to BYU that I haven't approved. It never occurred to me.
That's what all criminals say. This is illegal? We can't just take crap home from work? I thought,
Well, see, I had been inviting people to club meetings, and then that's what this was supposed to be, to a club meeting. Well, if Hubert Humphrey was coming, they had to open up the whole center, and so
let me just give a little bit of a background here for those of you who are still listening, which is probably only Rachel's mom. I know that my mom's listening because she didn't have to download this because she's here in studio. So in the 1968 election for president, Lyndon Johnson was the president, and Lyndon Johnson, he walked tall and carried a big stick and a big mouth. I mean, he was a big person in politics, and in a pretty big surprise, actually, to most people at the time, he announced that he wasn't going to run for re-election. Now, he'd already filled more than one term because he took over for John F. Kennedy when Kennedy was assassinated, and but then had won election. He had won the first actual election when he'd run against Barry Goldwater, and in fact, that's actually the last election that Utah voted for the Democratic nominee for president. So that's the high watermark, actually, of Democrats in Utah in the 20th century. Lyndon Johnson won Utah so it was not a completely far-fetched idea that Utah had enough Democrat support. I mean, on the electoral map, the last election, Lyndon Johnson had carried Utah. And the main issue, the reason why Johnson, I mean, I'm sure Johnson says something different in his memoirs, but the reason why Johnson decided to not run again was the Vietnam War had become incredibly unpopular by 1968. Maybe I should ask, while we're talking about politics, because that way we can offend everybody, what were your thoughts about Lyndon Johnson as president before he said he wasn't going to run again? What did you think about him as a young Democrat?
We were very frustrated. At the time, when you want, all the young men had to sign up for the draft, and you were called to Vietnam according to your draft number. We had classmates and people in the club whose numbers were from 1 to 5, who automatically knew they had to leave as soon as the semester was over, had to leave to go to Vietnam. And it was very hard to support someone who...
So you felt like you were opposed to the draft and the war, but the president that represented your party was the one sending, he was the one sending hundreds of thousands of people.
Right.
Eventually over 500,000 American service members at one time in Vietnam. And then of course millions serve altogether. But, so were you excited when he said he wasn't going to run for re-election?
I don't know that I thought much about one way or the other. I was just hoping that next election things would be a little better.
So were you someone who wanted the Vietnam War to end then?
Oh, yes.
Did you march in rallies?
No, we didn't do things like that at BYU.
Then as now.
At the BYU.
Well, see, I spent my summers, when I was going to BYU, I spent my summers in Washington, D.C. working for congressmen. And so my protesting and things like that happened in the summer, not on.
I see. So in D.C., where
let your hair down.
Yeah.
Well, I lived on 16th Street when 14th Street was burned, and this type of thing. So I had plenty of it when I was in Washington, D.C. I didn't need to do it at BYU.
So when
Just really quick, her podcast would be so much better
yeah,
than
actually,
your podcast.
I think we probably need to start a spin-off podcast, the Renee Dirkmaat podcast.
Let's talk about Gerrit.
But if you were the only person who could figure out how to download it, I mean, the numbers would it would be hard. I mean, if we lose you, we lose not only our matriarch, we also lose at least 85% of our downloads.
You're not.
So when Hubert Humphrey, well, we'll stick to Hubert Humphrey for just a second.
yeah. No,
so
that's what all the kids want to know
now
about?
everybody listening is like, Hubert Humphrey, I'd love to be like him.
No, I love that, by the way. So she's telling a beautiful story, and it's very interesting. And then you like, you know what? Let's history this up a little bit. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, that's the reason why the podcast doesn't work very well. Because like, hey, this is really interesting. Let's talk about townships. What have we talked about?
So you made Wilkinson mad. Now let me set the table here with the political climate at the time.
I had no idea that. Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, I don't know that we're helping, but Humphrey on that trip to Utah, he announced that if he was elected, he was going to halt the bombing of North Vietnam, which was seen as a major de-escalation. I mean, that was one of the things that was, the only way you can win the war in Vietnam, the only way you can bring the Vietnamese to the negotiating table is by massive bombing. And he essentially held out this olive branch to North Vietnam saying, if I'm elected, we're not going to bomb anymore. So that must have made you think, well, there's actually a chance the war is going to end.
Right.
And of course, Hubert Humphrey, spoiler alert, Hubert Humphrey does not win. But he, it's a fairly close popular vote. Richard Nixon does win. And in fact, Richard Nixon does actually
end the war,
de-escalate the war. I mean, so he certainly does things that upset people who are opposed to the war for sure, expanding the war into Cambodia and Laos. But eventually the war is going to end. And, that's why you all know who Henry Kissinger is, essentially. But, okay, so Richard just looked at me as if there's not a single person listening who knows who Henry Kissinger is.
All right, look, I'm not saying that no one knows, but you said, so that's why all of you know. And also, I just like to say, so first of all, this is a lot of fun. Renee, you need to replace me, obviously. It's way more fun when you're here, but you said his famous speech, and you're using the word famous again in kind of a historical context.
In air quotes?
Well, I mean, like, again, that's why all of us know Henry Kissinger.
Well, we try to stay away from more modern history because I don't know it very well, and clearly there's politics involved. It's a lot easier when you're talking about wigs.
I will say we just lean right into the. So you had an opportunity to meet him then. Was he very nice? A lovely man.
Yes,
you got to meet him.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How was his speech?
I thought. Oh, I was so nervous that I don't remember what he said, but it went over really well. He got a big ovation and everything at the end, and huge crowd. So it did well.
Did you have any contact with the BYU administration after?
Well, I'm just glad I graduated.
Okay, well that's how you know. So hopefully no one who works as my boss at BYU knows the incendiary past of my mother as she was.
It was the 60s.
So it was fine. That's what we've always said.
It's just one of those things in the 60s.
So then what are some of the things that kind of give a little bit of a life sketch for your son? You talked a little bit about those things. I know we keep trying to get to find more stories from you, and you just keep wanting to talk more about your son, which is very sweet. But Gerrit doesn't want any of that.
Yeah, there's a reason why I'm pushing the
Hubert Humphrey.
Hubert Humphrey. In fact, we'll call this episode Hubert Humphrey. Hubert Humphrey and the White Horse Prophecy.
So a little bit then, a life sketch about your son.
All right. One thing about Gerrit
this is after the doctors made fun of me when I was born.
Oh. Gerrit was raised on a 40-acre farm. His dad was a nuclear engineer, so he didn't farm the farm. But Gerrit and his brothers all grew up moving sprinkler pipes, working on the farm. And one thing, but Gerrit always had the goal that he wanted, like I said before, he wanted to teach history to adults. His brother wanted to be the next J. Willard Marriott, and he kind of worried about Gerrit's low expectations, he thought.
Right. He wanted to be an expansive hotel magnate, and I wanted to be a history teacher. That seems... Thank you for setting the bar so high.
The problem was, at the time Gerrit grew up, there were so many people graduating from history with a history major, more than there were jobs in the United States. And so we were kind of worried about
So right now, then, that's the same thing as now, but go ahead.
We were afraid, but we felt like it's important that he do what he's capable of doing and what he was very qualified to do. And Gerrit always had this dream of going to BYU and then graduating from BYU and then going to Stanford and to get his master's like his dad did. And he went to BYU for the summer after
And then
graduating.
they found out that my mom invited Hubert Humphrey and I was asked to leave.
To Utah State.
They said, you will go to the Gulag Archipelago of Utah State for your crimes.
Anyway, he went one summer to live to BYU,
Yes.
to live with his brother, who was also going to BYU.
The successful one, yeah.
But Utah State gave him a better offer, and free is always better than money, so he had to go to Utah State. And,
I loved Utah State. It was not the death sentence.
Oh, but you thought it was at first.
Well, I wanted to go to BYU.
He
I
wanted to go to
apologize
BYU
all the
really
U of U
badly.
listeners, to all the
But
UVU listeners.
But he ended up at Utah State, and it was such a blessing because he met his beautiful wife there, who was also attending Utah State.
If you want to hear from her, we have a previous bonus episode that you've also probably not listened to. And she's in that.
And when he graduated from Utah State with his degree in history, he had to go to graduate school if he was going to teach adults history. And he applied at several places, but his goal was to go to Stanford. Well, he didn't get where he wanted to go, and it just seemed like...
You can just say it. I'm a failure.
No, he didn't get to go there, but University of Colorado Boulder offered him what he needed to be able to go to get his graduate degree and found it monetarily. And at the time, and probably still is, it's considered the most liberal school in the United States.
Well, it's obviously not worse than Berkeley.
Well, that's what I said. That's what I said. Besides Berkeley, and they were having a lot of criticism at the time, a lot of backlash because of their liberalism, and so Gerrit became their token conservative and the only Latter-day Saint in the program.
And to be fair, I am a political independent. I don't actually belong to a party, but
they didn't know that.
Literally anyone who believes in God who attends the University of Colorado is considered a conservative.
Yeah, you're a member of the John Birch Society.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I was legitimately in a class one time where we were discussing, it was about European religion, and I was in this class, and people were actually making fun of the fact that some people were still, essentially dumb enough to believe in God, and that how religion has done nothing but suppress people. And they're kind of going around the room, and I said, well, I still believe in God. And I still remember that there was a very nice girl in one of these classes, and she looked at me in this very confused way and said, Gerrit, you seem so smart. How could you possibly believe in God? So there's that. Yeah.
Anyway, it turned out to be a real blessing for him because he was able to live next door to his brother, who was an entrepreneur and going to law school at University of Colorado, Denver. And their wives were friends, and so this was a good thing for him, and they were able to help each other. then he got it, when he finally, when it came time to write his doctoral dissertation, he had a lot of trepidation about what to do because he wanted to write it on the treatment the United States government gave the Mormons, or how they handled the Mormon situation from the time the church was organized till it got to Utah. And he didn't know whether or not he should do this in a school like Boulder, but he did it. And he wrote it, and they were not very happy about it, but they gave him his...
I did have one of the members of my PhD committee make fun of the fact that I was a Mormon in my PhD defense, which is supposed to be the most, the highest level thing. He said, well, you're talking an awful lot about things in here, but why don't you tell me a little bit about things like Anheuser-Busch? Oh, you don't know anything about that, do you? Because you don't drink beer. He was not kidding, actually. He was very serious about it.
Why did he want to know about Anheuser-Busch?
I think because he'd been a long PhD defense and he wanted some Anheuser-Busch. I don't know.
Well, why not Coors?
Well, I think because, he had a...
Tap the rock.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'd think that, but I think he was looking at maybe the rivals, trying to pin it on the Mormons.
And as soon as he passed, his defended his dissertation, then he was hired by the by the Joseph Smith papers in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, and that was a great experience. It's fun to get the chance to talk to you about these different things, but I think that it's actually far more interesting to listen to things from your life than mine. That's why I've been trying to direct this the whole way. Don't you think, Richard?
Oh, it's not even close. Not even close, really.
Yeah, I know.
We're already getting texts in.
Yeah, this hasn't dropped. This isn't live, and multiple people have emailed saying put more of Renee.
More Renee.
Yeah, I gotta have more Renee.
It is funny. So these bonus episodes are a lot of fun for us, and we don't necessarily care if anyone else enjoys it because we're having a good time. But the thing is that they are the most polarizing of the podcasts. We receive very strong feedback in the positive or the negative anytime we talk about any of these things.
Well, and we make them a bonus because we don't want anyone to feel like, oh, I tuned in to listen to my usual discussion of the White Horse Prophecy. I tuned in to learn more about township and land acquisition and
Craig Wilson.
Yeah. Craig, I that usually he's our other download. Rachel's mom, Craig Wilson, my mom, and then I that's about it. I mean, Jed Grow in North Dakota is the other download.
Oh, Jed, thank you so much.
Yeah, Jed was amazing. But apparently we have quite the listenership in the Tri-City areas where my brother lives. We asked my mom about that, did Nathan share the podcast?
You should have her tell the story. It's great.
Why don't you tell the story?
I went up to visit Nathan, and I got bombarded by... Nathan had people come up to him. There's this Dirkmaat who does this podcast. Are you related to him? And Nathan says, yes, he's my brother. And there are many people up there who listen to his podcast. And they came up to me and talked to me while I was up there for church.
If there's a lot of people up there, I can only assume Rachel's mom lives
in the Tri-City
in Pasco. I don't know.
Well, so I will say so that's a bit of a revisionist version of the story.
Yeah, she was cleaning that up for the air.
Yeah, so when she told the story originally, there was a woman in Nathan's ward who came up to Nathan and asked about it, and Nathan had no idea what she was talking about.
No, there's no Dirkmaat who has a podcast, which shows the kind of family support I get from my brother. What idiot would listen to my brother on the radio?
This lady had also read his book about the translation of the Book of Mormon.
She really is that rainbow unicorn, the one, that has read the book and listened to the podcast.
Yeah.
I wish we could give her a shout out, but
I'll ask Nathan.
We'll figure out. Yeah, find out. Now Nathan won't respond to you because he won't believe that you have a son that has a podcast, but he'll think that you're clearly trying to sell him something as a Russian hacker.
We'll have to bring her in and have her as a guest for our special Arbor Day podcast.
Yeah,
we'll do a bonus episode.
And what about Secretary's Day? We're doing
the unsung heroes.
The unsung, yeah.
So we had talked about before. The '60s was a tumultuous time, as you were talking about. You had no idea, you had no intention of talking more about it, but when you were talking to us privately, it was very interesting.
So we're going to force everyone else to listen.
So you talked about when you had first gone, you're an adult, you're going off to school, and JFK is assassinated, and what just you said you were such a huge fan. That had to have been.
It was very, very hard. I was walking across BYU campus when somebody. There was all this commotion all at once, and this girl started crying, JFK's been shot, President Kennedy's been shot. And I walked into the library, and my friend from home was there, and I walked up to him, and I said, did you hear? And he was not very nice about his response. Wow. And I went home so devastated because I couldn't imagine anybody being sad that the President of the United States happy that the President of the United States had been shot.
Or happy that anyone had been shot.
Anybody, especially at this time when there was so much, I just couldn't believe that anybody would do that. But anyway, and so it was really hard for me to really concentrate for a while. It was for anybody in the United States. That's all we thought about, and that's all we talked about for weeks at a time after that.
So then, how did you meet? How did you meet Gerrit's dad? How did you end up back in Idaho?
Well, I decided after living in Washington, D.C. that maybe I didn't want to be a professional politician.
Well, at this point, the track record is you nearly getting kicked out of BYU and JFK getting shot. So
I just decided that maybe I had better use my English major and teach school for a while and see how I felt about things. And my mother was ill with cancer, and so it was important to me to be close to her. And so I got a job, a teaching job in Soda Springs, Idaho, and then
for those of you who don't know, is I know it's not literally the coldest place in Idaho,
but it is too.
But there are people who live in Star Valley who are like, I'm not going to Soda Springs because it's too cold there.
It's cold. Anyway, my mother died that spring, and I just wanted to get away, so I went to California and taught in Utah and around. And my friends that I had started out teaching with in Soda Springs they had come to Shelley, Idaho to teach, and they talked the principal into offering me a contract to teach English in Shelley, and so I came. So I could be with my friends.
Just like those Democrats getting this inside job.
Hey,
if
my friend's father, my friend's father was the Democratic chairman of the party at the time.
Oh, so actually, that's exactly what happened. I was making
Shelley?
A joke.
How many Democrats are in Shelley?
No, they lived in Sugar City, but he was on the state Democratic committee. Anyway,
back then there were.
Well, anyway, let's forget.
Cecil Andrus?
Cecil Andrus is a great governor.
Yeah.
Frank Church?
Yeah, Frank Church was really...
Yeah, the Frank Church Wilderness exists.
Yeah, we were really loved Frank Church. Anyway...
we've now lost literally every listener we have in Idaho.
So I came...
This podcast...
you envision someone's like, all right, I've been through all of this. If they mention Frank Church, I am out of here.
I'm out. No, every Idaho listener that's a conservative is like, nope, and we're done. Thank you, and you can take your liberal politics.
Anyway, by the way, if somebody asks me now, I vote as Republican.
Oh, don't tell people that. Now we just lost all of our Democrats. What? The download numbers on our podcast are going backwards. This is a ticker.
Anyway, you asked me how I met my husband.
Okay.
He was a nuclear engineer out to the site, and I was teaching school, lived in Shelley, and I don't know how we met. We just kind of met through. There was a teacher who was also the ward clerk, and he told my husband that he ought to to meet me, and so I had never seen him, and he'd never seen me, and so he called me up right there while at the church house. The kids were playing basketball, and I could hear him in the background, and asked for a date. And
so Dad just called you without ever having even met you at all.
Hey,
my buddy's the ward clerk. Would you like to go out?
Well, this is the importance of a ward directory, by the way.
Wow.
Well, his name was Wally Hamilton, and he had asked Pete for all his ward her personal information for
the ward clerk was Wally.
The
Hamilton.
ward clerk.
Yeah, your husband is.
No, my husband was Peter Dirkmaat.
There you go. Okay.
Anyway,
That cleared up a lot of things.
Between
I was questioning so much about my life.
Anyway, we got married. This was in around Thanksgiving time, and we got married in February. We didn't waste any time.
So you got married less than 2 months after you met.
That's right.
Now, I've always enjoyed the fact that Dad deliberately married you on Valentine's Day.
Right.
Now that's the work of an engineer.
That's what it is. It was absolutely an engineer. He's like, I knew I was gonna have to buy an anniversary gift, and I knew I'd have to buy a Valentine's gift. Problem solved.
That's right, and that's about the way he thought.
For a long time growing up, it was probably for about 10 years that I was cognizant, outside of all the concussions, and that my dad bought my mom a frying pan as a joke present. Now, I don't want anyone to think like my dad was like, that's your place in the kitchen or whatever.
He bought me a piano.
He would buy her nice gifts, but always as part of the joke, one of the gifts would be a frying pan.
Right.
I don't know.
Every year.
I don't know why. Well, you would also buy an actual gift, but then also just
a frying pan.
On
hidden.
Valentine's Day.
Well,
no, it was for Christmas.
Usually
It was
for Christmas.
I got it for Christmas. But my birthday was in December. Once in a while, I got it for my birthday rather than Christmas.
Is part of the reason that he married you that your birthday aligned to Christmas and he only had to buy one gift?
No.
Yeah, I think so. I think actually that's why
He's like,
he said,
I got this.
He said, Wally, show me her birthday. I'll step out of the church basketball game right now, and I'll call.
If she's a late December.
So what did he say that made you think, I guess I'll go out on a date with him?
Oh, he said that he was with Wally Hamilton, and that he told him to call me, and so he did, and it was really weird. I was supposed to meet, and I lived in a basement apartment, and I had nightmares from the time the phone call ended until I saw him, because
you had no picture of him.
Oh no, I had no.
You are so today we call things a blind date when we say, "Oh, I only saw their picture on Instagram."
And followed 5 years of activity.
Yeah, like looks like she used to work at Valley Fitness or something like that. No, I mean, in my mom's era, a blind date is a literal blind date. You have not seen them at all.
Anyway, the day that I was supposed to meet, I saw this old blue pickup, go up and down the street outside of where I was living.
Casing the joint.
And I thought, that's him. It's got to be him. And then when he came to the door, I thought, is it really smart for me to be answering the door in a basement apartment when I can't escape?
Well, he owns a pickup. I mean,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you have no faith in Wally Hamilton, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, Wally, what was he doing?
Anyway,
giving away church record information so people can date. We just
went out to dinner, and
he basically starts his own mutual, the Shelley Second Ward.
No, your dad did.
Yeah.
Anyway. We got married, and I moved into Second Ward. And
so, what impressed you about Dad?
Tell us about
what made you or was it a terrible first date?
It wasn't the best.
Oh. I'm sure Dad's happy to hear that.
Well, he knows.
God rest his soul. He knows. He was there for it.
So, what made it not the best?
Oh, just we got to talking about our past and things like that, and it was just one of those things.
Did he at that point find out you'd invited Hubert Humphrey to BYU?
No,
Okay,
not
that
till
was
after
later.
we were
Only
married.
after
I
married.
thought you were
Yeah,
married.
very smart.
That's-
Very
that's-
smart.
yeah, very shrewd.
Some skeletons you keep in the
So
closet
it
for
wasn't
a
the
while.
best just because, you know, you were just talking.
Just talking. Yeah.
Yeah. What about the second date? What'd you do on the second date?
I don't know.
When did you know?
I think I knew at the end of the first date.
Oh my! So it was a terrible date.
Oh, what was terrible is he had to go to Washington D.C. for 2 weeks, and so I stayed in his house while he was gone. Don't ask me why this.
Sounds
Why?
like the first day went very
Yeah.
well.
So what you're saying is you moved in together.
No, I didn't.
You heard it here, folks.
I moved into the house. He wasn't there.
Okay.
But
well,
my
that's not how it will be taken by any muckraking journalists.
but my bishop bishop said
Renee Hale moves into Dirkmaat Plantation.
no. He said my bishop said I don't think this looks very good. You guys better get married. So he married us on
So I'm
Valentine's.
not the only one who's throwing a 15-yard flag on that then. The bishop was like, yeah, you're not able to live in his house.
What was funny about it is he was also a school teacher. So there, you know, we were all in the same boat.
The bishop was.
The bishop was.
And
What was Wally Hamilton doing?
He was a teacher.
Oh, there you go.
what did he teach?
Oh, he was the school librarian at that time.
Oh, there you go. A classic Wally.
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
And the bishop was he had taught for many years, but I think at this time he was the school counselor. So, but anyway, so it was
apparently
it
the
was
school
like,
marriage counselor.
It's yeah, well,
Relationship counselor.
Oh, this is great.
Anyway,
Just great.
Yeah, that's good for posterity. What? Anything else you'd like to share?
no, other than
Are you going to be a regular feature, a regular part?
no
Oh,
way.
absolutely.
Richard's already willing to recuse himself.
Oh, my
No.
Maybe I'll
This is
recuse
it.
myself.
Renee, you were very good at this.
This is it. I was just trying to think of something that we should talk about. Oh, Gerrit, when he was in high school, he, along with the pipe moving that, he went to work at Mr. Pizza and loved it. He
In
loved it.
Shelley, Idaho, the
In
local
Shelley,
pizza
Idaho.
shop, run by
This
the
episode is
greatest.
sponsored by Mr.
That's not sponsored by it at all. But Shannon Albright, the owner of that, he was like a second father to me.
Right.
We would sit and talk and laugh every day. We'd work like crazy. It's 1,000,000 degrees in his store. I
He never had air conditioning.
No, you'd go in there. The pizza ovens are right there, and you'd be standing right next to him all day, every day. Anyone who's worked in a mom and pop pizza shop knows. Actually, that's where I have my son working now.
But it has air conditioning.
Well, it has some. I mean, it doesn't seem to be as effective as it could be, but yeah. I mean, but yeah, I worked at Mr. Pizza, delivering pizzas for years actually.
Yes, it was many years. And then he went to, I was going to say one thing about, he went to BYU and then he went on, after he went to Utah State one semester, then he went on a mission. Well, all his brothers had received their calls to foreign countries. So, and Gerrit desperately wanted to go on a foreign mission. He wanted.
I
to go
grew
to
up in Southeast Idaho,
and he wanted to, and he even studied German, so he'd be prepared to go on a foreign mission. And he got sent to Wisconsin, and
where there are Germanic people living.
and
partially.
he was devastated. He thought that was awful. But
And
anyway,
then I got to Wisconsin and was more devastated.
anyway. It was where he needed to be. He was assisted the president for 13 months. And,
I don't know. Was it that long?
yeah, it was 13
It was.
months.
It was.
It's interesting the way he tells it. He told me 15 months.
Yeah, it
He's
was.
always- he's
I
always
was.
bringing
I
it
was.
up.
I think I was assistant to president for somewhere around 27 months.
No,
I'm
I'm sorry. I thought it was.
getting out of.
From the womb.
Yeah, well, right as I landed, I came off the plane. They put assistant to the president on my chest, and I walked around.
No, that's not true. But it might have been longer than 13 months. But
I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure whatever number I gave you was inflated in any letter I wrote home.
I know it was 13 months at least, but I don't know. It might have been longer.
Well, I did get to see a lot of the state. I did have some cool experiences, some really special people there. And, one of the things you learn, you go to a mission like that in the United States where there's very, very, very few members. one of the things that frankly you wish you could replicate in Utah or maybe in Southeast Idaho or Arizona, where there's a lot of members, is this desperate need that the members had for one another in Wisconsin. If you were a member of, first of all, when I went there was only 3 stakes in the state. There's 5 million people in Wisconsin, and there are 3 stakes in the entire state. And one was in Milwaukee area, one was in Madison, and one took up like all of the northern area of Wisconsin. And it was just, members desperately needed one another. You're driving 25 minutes to church, and the saints you sit next to on those pews are the only Latter-day Saints that you saw all week. They're the only people who have any idea what your values are. And so that was actually something that was frankly beautiful. I mean, and I met some of the most amazing people who had sacrificed everything. There was a family there that was just so poor. And the reason why they were poor wasn't because they weren't hard workers. Both of them worked. He worked, and he was probably in his early 60s, late 50s at best. And he was still working in the manufactured housing industry, roofing houses the whole time. And it was, really hard work. His wife also worked. And the reason why they didn't have any money is their kids had just, addictions to drugs and alcohol. And so they were raising all of their grandkids. And it was a considerable number from multiple different kids. And they had gotten, legal custody of these kids because they've been treated badly and abused. Anyway, so they had nothing. And yet these people, they were in a legitimate fashion willing to give their shirt off of their back for anyone who was suffering or struggling. It made me feel bad to go to their house because I knew that they didn't have the money to pay for the food that they were trying to feed us that should have gone to the grandkids that they had, but they loved the gospel. And I remember having a conversation with them. I said, Brother Wire, you're doing everything for everybody. You're always out. I mean, if there's snow, he's shoveling people's yard. He's taking the missionaries everywhere. And he said, this gospel changed my life. This gospel is the most important thing that's ever happened to me and my wife. This gospel. He just kept saying that. Remember, he just kept kind of repeating this gospel over and over. And I wanted to have the connection with the church desperately that this family had, where everything in their life they attributed to God. Every happiness they had, they attributed to what God had blessed them with. And here they were suffering and struggling, and they couldn't have been more grateful to God. It was beautiful, a beautiful aspect of surfing there. So I didn't mean to take too long to tell this. I feel like I always tell a bad Wisconsin story, but
I think we need to end.
Oh, well, that's probably the way we should end this then is.
Well, I mean, it's just been an absolute pleasure. And Renee, when you've been in the podcast business as long as Gerrit and I, you can really see talent, and you've got it. You've got talent, but we do need you to continually download the episode 30 to 40 times a week. Yeah, that drove our early numbers. It drives our late numbers. I'm sure if we ever got some analytics going on this, it would show Idaho Falls, Idaho, Idaho Falls, Idaho, Idaho Falls, Idaho. So I will say, in seriousness though, Renee, I have been friends with your son for 20 plus years, and the impact and influence and guidance and teaching that you and your husband provided for him has been a marvel to watch as he has grown into what it is. And I just, me personally, just love you so much, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mom. Love you.
Love you too, Gerrit.